and then we'll just go ahead and put them in the incubator. And then the one other thing I'm going to do is right now, this is just telling us the temperature of the air, 34 degrees Fahrenheit. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the thermometer underneath the koji in there, so we get more of a reading of like what's actually happening in the koji. So okay, it went down. So now it'll slowly, as the koji like warms up being in there, it'll start to go up. This second number, don't worry about that. This is designed for meat. Hi Jeffy. This is designed for meat, and so like like when I brought this upstairs because heat rises in the house, and I actually like upstairs is going to be marginally warmer than down here, and it wasn't rising. I made it early in the day, and by the time I went to bed, it wasn't rising at all. So I was like, I really want this to ferment a little bit so we can enjoy nice light doses tomorrow. So now you can see it has risen, like by about a third or something. You can see little air pockets throughout. And that's what we want to see. And so this is basically rice and lentils that were just soaked. And then I used the wet grinder to grind them into a batter. Until 3 weeks ago, I always used the blender. The blender's fine. You don't have to buy another gadget for your kitchen. And then a dosa is just like a crepe of this. We'll probably end up adding a little bit more water to thin it down. An idli is a steam bread from this. So this is my idli form, and it's just like a little stand. And this one has 6 layers, and each layer has 4 little cups. And so, what you do is like, you just find a pot with a tight lid that this fits into. You put an inch of water at the bottom of it, and then you fill your idli your idli form from the bottom.
Do you put oil in it?
Yeah, usually I put oil on. I mean, I found that they end up sticking a little bit whether you use oil or you don't use oil. So I think of the oil as something that's more for flavor. Yeah. So, you can do it without oil if you want. And then you don't fill them all the way because they're going to rise. So you just put a nice dollop, about a tablespoon of batter in each of them. And then what I like to do is instead of putting them right over each other like this, I rotate it like this, so that the indentation of the next layer isn't right in the middle of the idli. It's sort of between idlis, so that they just have a little bit more room to each rise without running into constriction. And then I just like, the nice thing about idlis over dosas is, I can make 24 of them at the same time in 15 minutes, whereas the dosas, it's more of like an individual thing that needs to be cooked. On the other hand, I'll say that the fried edge of the dosa makes it worthwhile. So I've since I've learned a little bit better technique for making dosas, I've sort of moved on to mostly showing people dosas, which you don't need special equipment for, and ultimately I find them to be more delicious. But we could also make some idli. And then we're gonna have, we can't just, this is a vehicle. Like this isn't like what you eat for a meal. So then Morris pulled out the red lentils, and we'll make a little bit of a dal to go with it. We'll make a couple of chutneys to go with it. And then maybe someone will have some inspiration for turning the leftover squash into next day squash of some sort. Mm.
Are you looking for a third rise, one like more or less that kind of rise, or it just doesn't really matter?
I mean, this over the course of this day would just continue to. I mean, this could grow out of this. I mean, this could rise more and more. I mean, in India, people tend to give it a really short fermentation. Like 4 to 8 hours. They just want to see that it's risen.
Right.
They're not too concerned with how much it's risen.
Okay.
And then as long as it's like on its rising trend, like if you leave it for too long, it'll rise and then collapse. But as long as it's on its rising trend, when you put it on a hot pan, you'll get a rise from the heat. Like as it gets warmer, you get more of a rise. So, I mean, as long as it's on its rising trend, I feel like it's fine.
Okay.
And I sometimes will make dosa batter, and I'll eat the same dosas for like a week, but I don't leave it out for a week. It'll exhaust its rising potential. So once it's like rising by once it's doubling, I want to get it in the fridge, so it doesn't collapse and lose its potential to further rise in the pan.
You cook it.
And don't be shy to water.
They span.
So we're going to thin it out to make dosas, but I think just because there's curiosity about idlis, we might as well make some idlis first.
Sure.
Yeah. And just put a little bit of oil into one, and then just take a little clean piece of a cloth, and then just sort of spread that oil around into the rest of them. So does someone want to take on the oiling? All right, you got it. Great. And here's the rest of these, but don't stack them up. And then the one thing we need to add to this batter, what's the magic ingredient that's very easy to forget?
Salt.
Yes. And then, I mean, certainly I've had wonderful idli and dosa where people added different kinds of herbs, but, I've also, like, that's not the way they typically do it in India. So usually they do this plain, and then they eat this with flavorful things, but, know that you can do it different ways, and you could go ahead, as I'm adding in salt here, and I sometimes add the salt at the beginning. I used to always add the salt at the beginning because if I didn't, I would forget, but I've gotten better at remembering. So I'm mixing it in now. You can see that I've disturbed the structure a little bit. It's not as high as it was, but that's all right because it's going to get its sort of like lift from the heat. And then while it's thick like this, here what I'll do is I'm going to pour a bunch of it into this bowl, and this will be for the idlis. And basically, well, I'll fill up the first couple ones and show you what I have in mind. You don't want to fill it to its capacity because they are going to grow.
Can you shake this until it starts to move in the can?
So that's the first level. And then we take the next layer that's already oiled, and instead of going directly on top where we might smush them down, we're going to just turn it a half a turn. So the lowest parts, are over between them. And then if someone wants to continue adding this batter to it, I'm going to go ahead and add some water to this and make this thinner, and we'll start doing some crepes. The first pancake that I need to add a little bit more water.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Okay.
But look how much more like liquidy and runny this is, as compared to the solid that we were dealing with before.
Can you use any kind of lentil?
I mean, this is the traditional thing is urad dal. I could go over there and grab some, but it's basically like a white lentil with a black skin.
Okay.
I've made it a lot with red lentils.
Okay.
If you can use green lentils for sure, but they'll end up with this sort of grayish color that's not as appealing. The batter will be a little bit pink if you use red lentils, but then when you cook them, they'll end up being white. So this is the sort of commonly available in North America alternative, but really, there are Indian groceries in like every like small and medium city in the U.S. and you just have to find it. And that's where my idli steamer. This one I got this 6-layer one I got in New York, but I found a 4-layer one in Nashville. So the one I used for the first 10 years was smaller and from Nashville, just so the steam will stay in there. We're not going to engage the pressure. We don't need or want pressure, but we just want like a pot with a tight fit that'll hold some steam. If you don't have a nice tight fit, you might want to put a little weight on top just to help hold some steam in there. And we'll lift this up, put it in here. You never want the water to come up to the idli. You want them to steam, not like be immersed in water. And then, 15 to 20 minutes from when it comes up to a boil, and they're risen and set.
Is there a reason there's 3 empty spots in there?
We ran out of batter. And then we'll just go ahead and put this and let this start steaming. So at like 1:30, this will be ready.
Like the essential oils.
Does this need to?
That's just kind of simmering.
Okay, great. It's working. And then we have the back one going. Then these two are warming up. So here's the thing about the idli that really was elusive for me for a long time. Like barely any oil. So we use this for oiling those forms. We're just going to use the same thing just to sort of make sure the pans don't have dry patches. But we don't want this to be like swimming in oil. Like the way I make the other pancakes, where I take a big pat of butter and I just put it in and let the pancakes like fry in it. Too much oil will make these stick more. I mean, it's weird. Like, it really surprised me when I learned that. But less oil is better. And then, God, when I watch people who've been doing this their whole life, they just take a ladle and they like ladle it out and then use the bottom of the ladle to thin it out. I just have not gotten a technique on that, and I'll show you a much simpler technique that I've been using. And I will use a ladle and a pot holder, and then I'm going to just take a little of this batter and then just use gravity. And then we'll just go ahead and put it back on the fire. And I'm not going to do it the next one until we do this first one and taste it, evaluate the salt, and see if I'm going to add a little bit more water so it spreads even thinner than that. And then except for the fact that I want to taste the first one before proceeding, I would be starting the second one. And I'll do two at a time. A little golden developing on the most cooked parts.
Wait, what? I'm confused. What's the one we don't flip and we put the?
That's injera.
Oh yeah, injera. Okay.
Yeah. Like every other pancake I know of, you always flip.
Yeah.
What I'll sometimes do, like when I'm cooking myself, is like, so I'll flip this, and then I'll crack an egg on the top and put the top in there.
Yeah.
Let the egg steam on top of the dosa.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, actually, I like to be ready to sort of hot pan. So we will use not quite a ladleful to make sure we have enough for everybody. Try to get it in the center, and then just sort of like rotate around to try to spread it. And then it's back on there. And now the other one is ready for the same thing. Basically, does someone want to do a few dosas, and then we'll, anyone who wants to try doing a few, we'll just like pass it on.
I'll do it. I'm getting.
Okay. Great. Scooping each of them out of its form, and then we'll just pile up the forms inside of this, and then we'll soak them in water. And you just need this because they're still hot. Okay. So I realize I have the vision in my head, but just like, clearing the area where we're going to eat, thinking about serving utensils for for each thing. I love these tongs. I got a bunch of tongs. Okay, the chutneys will need some spoons. Okay, I have a the radish kraut out here. What else can we?
Oh my gosh. So please take care of that.
And then is this must be the squash thing back here?
The doll. Is it the, no, it's
Yeah,
that's
it's
the doll,
doll,
yeah.
This is so interesting. Yeah, shell hot salt rising bread.
Remaining dosa batter, there's just a little bit. I'm gonna put it in the fridge, and after y'all are gone, I'm gonna find it, and one morning I'll have like dosas with eggs for breakfast or something like that. But like, you know, once you've gotten a good rise, you don't want to keep leaving it out. Like it'll exhaust itself. And so, but you know, you can store it in the fridge for a week or probably even longer.
You could also just top it up, right?
I mean, the shoulder seasons when you're not running the heat tend to be the hardest times. So, you know, that's like,
This
if
dish.
it's 4 degrees
Outrageous. Did you get
outside,
this, Chad?
you know.
That looks yummy. Yum. Well done.
Chutney spicy.
Thank you for letting me see the final plate too.
It's really good.
Because I've done it so much that
Are they beautiful?
I think you can do it. You can do it with store-bought milk. You just have to have it.
I did.
Yeah, you don't have to have it.
Okay.